Chapter 856, Bodyguards Arrive. In an apartment in Sherwood Borough. Just as Zio entered, she caught the scent of fried food. She couldn't help but twitch her nose and look towards the kitchen.
Fours?
Would there be anyone else?
Fours peeked her head out from the kitchen and asked with a smile. Shio put down the papers in her hand, half surprised and half grumbling.
Do you still remember how long it's been since you stepped into a kitchen? Making toast in the morning doesn't count.
Fours returned to the kitchen, leaving only her voice behind.
I choose the food outside because they're better. And now, the surrounding streets don't have any good fried chicken. I suddenly had cravings for it. When it comes to Intis cuisine, I like it the most.
Sio walked to the kitchen and leaned against the doorframe as she watched Fours busily prepare dinner. She deliberated and said,
I received a job, 100 pounds a day, ranging from 3 to 5 days, but I need another helper. Weren't you previously lacking in money? Why don't we do it together?
Actually, my financial situation has improved. However, a mission that pays 50 pounds a day isn't bad. I'll save up as much as I can. There will be plenty of places that require me to spend money in the future.
As Fours watched her oil-filled pot, she asked.
What kind of job is it?
She had already calculated how much she could receive. Hente. Zhu combed her slightly coarse blonde hair and said,
Secretly protect a tycoon named Dwayne Dantes.
What did he encounter? Will it be very dangerous?
Force asked cautiously. Shio recalled and said,
Apparently there was some kind of business conflict, and his competitor has threatened him. This isn't anything dangerous. As you are aware, the powerful Beyonders in Backland wouldn't dare to take any risks, as it's easy to expose themselves, causing them to be targeted by the Nighthawks and mandated punishers.
Perhaps the other party is a lunatic? You can't rule that out.
While retorting, Fours naturally thought of the world Gehrman Sparrow.
This gentleman was a lunatic who dared to pull off major upsets in Backland.
She paused and scooped up the pieces of fried chicken.
Since you've already accepted the mission and I have nothing coming up recently, let's do it together. It's good too. We will be protecting him in secret so no one will discover that I'm a bodyguard. Otherwise, I'll have no way of participating in those literature saloons. Heh. Actually, I can tell them that I'm experiencing life and gathering material. My next novel will be about a female bodyguard and her male employer.
Shio was already used to Force's penchant for letting her thoughts wander. She scrunched up her nose and said,
Let's head over after dinner.
160 Bauckland Street. Klein had set up a ritual in the master bedroom's bathroom and headed above the gray fog. He planned on handling some random matters before the bodyguards hired by Butler Walter came. It wouldn't be convenient for him to do them in the coming days. And among these random matters, the most important task was to confirm the situation with the creeping hunger. Sitting behind the seat belonging to the fool, Klein made the human skin glove fly out from the junk pile. After a series of divinations, he discovered that the creeping hunger was rather stubborn this time. None of the negative side effects had changed.
It's a result of Mr. A's corruption, so it's absolutely not giving up its praise of the true creator? Find another way to threaten it? No, how can I call it threatening? Under the premise of being proactive, I will be engaging in friendly communication with it. I'll be writing to Mr. Azek later anyway. I can also mention in passing that the creeping hunger seal is no longer effective.
The corners of Klein's mouth twitched as he seriously considered the solution to this matter. Klein rapped the corner of the long, mottled table and muttered silently.
I can also bring some mushrooms along with me. No, that wouldn't work. Although it will stop the creeping hunger from praising the true creator, it will make it unusable. I'll get a few of the original mutated mushrooms from Frank to see if there are other effects.
After determining his thought process, Klein threw Azek's copper whistle and the adventurer's harmonica through the door of sacrifice and bestowment before returning to the real world. He packed up the ritual items and wiped away any traces of the ritual. After leaving the bathroom, Klein walked to his study desk, taking out a fountain pen and paper as he deliberated over the things to say.
Dear Mr. Ozick, it's been a while since I've written to you. I wonder how you've been recently. Due to certain unforeseen circumstances, your seal on the creeping hunger is no longer effective. Can you give me the corresponding method? I wish to apply the seal on it again. Have you heard of creatures known as spirit world plunderers? What level are they? And what kinds of characteristics do they have? Where are they usually active in? I might be heading to the southern continent in the near future. If I obtain any new information on death, I'll write to you as soon as possible.
Putting down the fountain pen and reading it twice, Klein folded the letter and blew the copper whistle. Silently, white bones spewed out from the floor, gushing out like a fountain into midair, forming a giant skeleton that was nearly 4 meters tall. The skeleton lowered its head to glance at Duane Dantes before bending its back, bending its right arm and spreading open its palm.
This messenger is becoming more polite.
Klein nodded in satisfaction, handing it the letter. The skeleton messenger didn't stay, and it immediately disintegrated, pouring down like a waterfall before rapidly vanishing. Klein silently heaved a sigh of relief as he retracted his gaze and continued writing a letter to Frank.
The dried mushrooms you provided were pretty good. Do you still have more? Do you find the idea I previously mentioned viable? If you encounter any difficulties during the research process, you can write to me.
After folding the letter, Klein blew into the adventurer's harmonica. He saw Miss Messenger Raynette Tinneker appear by his side. She still lacked a head as she wore a complicated black dress while holding 4 beautiful blonde, red-eyed heads.
Can you lock on to Frank Lee?
Klein asked rather confidently. After all, Miss Messenger was unlike ordinary messengers. She was a spirit world creature at the demigod level. Under normal circumstances, a messenger could only locate the contractor or the person who held the summoning ritual. As for the latter, there was a limitation. Once the ritual was too far away, the messenger wouldn't be able to find them. Raynette Tinneker's 4 heads turned in unison and looked at Klein.
Yes, it's that man who wants to plant everything, right?
What did Frank do to leave such a deep impression on Miss Messenger? Back when I replied, she even said that she hoped that he wasn't dead.
Klein nodded seriously.
Yes.
Raynette Tinneker's 4 heads spoke one after another.
Can locate. I labeled him.
Huh? Klein turned to Gape, nearly forgetting his motives.
Poor Frank, no, the great and powerful Frank. He actually got Miss Messenger to specially label him. May the goddess watch over him.
Klein silently exhaled and handed the letter to Raynette Tinneker.
Please hand it to Frank. He will pay you the gold coin.
One of the heads in Raynette Tinneker's hand opened its mouth and bit down on the letter. Then it directly entered the spirit world, unable to be sensed again. After dealing with these matters, Klein left the copper whistle and harmonica on him. He went downstairs to have dinner. Midway, Walter entered and whispered into Duane Dantes's ear.
The bodyguards have arrived. It's that Miss Shio and her friend from before. I will arrange for them to secretly provide you protection.
Miss Zio and her friend? Don't tell me it's Miss Magician.
Klein was momentarily at a loss for words as all he could do was gently nod, acknowledging the new tidbit of information. His spirituality actually didn't sense that someone had infiltrated his house. However, this was very normal since it wasn't time for most people to sleep for the night. When it was that period of time, any abnormalities became rather obvious. Therefore, unless Klein specially used his spirituality to leave undetectable marks at key spots, or if the intruder had plenty of ill intentions towards him, he would find it difficult to notice them. In a bedroom on the 3rd floor, CO and Fours each took a window. Through the glass, they looked down at the garden.
This is my dream house. When I have enough money, I'll buy a house just like this in a scenic area. No, I'll still choose Backland. There are more delicacies here, and it's more convenient.
Fours said sincerely. With that said, she sighed inwardly.
Unfortunately, I have the curse of the full moon. I can only continue improving myself. Otherwise, I'd have kept a house instead of selling it for cash.
Shio traced her friend's gaze and looked outside, whispering.
I lived in such a residence when I was little.
Fours stole a glance at Shio. As she had no idea what to say, she changed topics.
How should we provide him with protection?
Shio retracted her gaze.
When Mr. Dwayne Dantes is home and without guests, we'll just hide in the room and watch the surroundings to prevent anyone from infiltrating. When there are guests, we'll head to the adjacent room and keep close attention to any developments. We'll open the door at any moment to save him. If Mr. Dwayne Dantes were to head out, the butler will inform us ahead of time. I'll hide underneath the carriage to protect him while you'll follow on another carriage.
Shio, you're becoming more and more professional.
Force seriously praised her before chuckling.
I saw Mr. Dwayne Dantes' portrait just now. If you hadn't told me that the danger arose because of a business conflict, I would have suspected that the problem arose because of love.
Before Forrest finished her sentence, she suddenly saw a carriage stop outside the compound. Following that, a few policemen in black and white checkered uniforms got out of the carriage.
What's happening?
She looked at her friend and found Gio looking equally puzzled. Inside the living room on the second floor, Klein met the four officers.
Mr. Dwayne Dantes, do you know Mr. Quarren?
Quaron?
Klein tried recalling and remembered that it was the gentleman who had sold him the coin company shares.
Yes, what happened to him?
Klein asked calmly. The officer that led the team replied in a rather polite manner.
He committed suicide. In addition, he left behind a will, accusing you of forcing him to sell his shares and torturing him using all kinds of underhanded means, causing him to suffer from severe depression. And his family has provided proof regarding the contents of his will.
Chapter 857, Poignant. As Klein listened to the officer's description, he digested the relevant information and produced questions in his mind.
Quaron committed suicide? His will accused me of forcing him to sell his shares? His family can even provide evidence?
After he understood the situation, his first reaction was,
Baron Cindrus has taken action. This powerful banker didn't hesitate to carry out his follow-up action against me after failing to cooperate with me, treating me as an enemy. He didn't hold back. Furthermore, he has clearly gathered enough information to know that Dwayne Dantes is involved with the Church of Evernight and Member of Parliament Mocked, and the faction backing him. If he were to directly deal with me, it would easily attract unwanted trouble. Therefore, he chose to strike at the other end of the transaction, Quaron. This will be more indirect and safer, but it would be equally treacherous and ruthless. This is an utter disregard of an ordinary person's life.
Klein suddenly recalled the innocent people who collapsed during the great smog of Backland. He couldn't help but feel a sense of rage surge within him as it bubbled to the surface, but was ice cold. Klein used his clown powers to control his facial expression, making him look even more surprised as he asked, seemingly finding the situation incomprehensible.
Are you certain you aren't joking?
The leading officer nodded solemnly.
If we didn't have sufficient clues to support it, we wouldn't disturb a gentleman like you. Mr. Dwayne Dantes, I'll have to trouble you to follow us to the station for further investigations.
Despite looking unperturbed, Klein's mind was racing. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly noticed something illogical.
Regardless, murder is a serious crime in the current Lowen Kingdom. With Baron Cindrus's identity, status, and social connections, he will have at least a few dozen effective means to deal with a foreign tycoon that just came to Backland 2 months ago. There's no need to go this far. After all, as a member of high society, he will more or less understand or be in contact with Beyonder powers. He knows that there are all kinds of incredible means to pursue the true murderer. Unless he's completely confident, taking the risk to frame someone for murder is definitely the worst choice. If Sindris were to use his authority to suppress the investigations of the official Beyonders, it will definitely be more effective and simpler to employ other means. Even if he temporarily isn't aware that I'm about to work with the military, he's definitely aware of my connection with the Church of Evernight and Member of Parliament Mocked. He wouldn't do things in such a simple and brazen manner. Most importantly, even if he's the kind of murderer who would kill for 3% shares, why didn't he do it earlier? He could have held Quarren at gunpoint early on, resolving the matter without causing any fuss.
Klein glanced at the officers in front of him while in thought without immediately giving an answer. And in an adjacent room, Shio and Fors were leaning against the wall. Using the latter's ability to open a small door, they didn't miss any parts of the entire conversation.
What do we do? If the police want to arrest him, do we still provide protection?
Fors, who lacked the experience of a bounty hunter, hurriedly suppressed her voice as she asked her friend. She never expected that the business conflict would result in a case of murder and suspicion of framing. The enemy she had imagined had transformed from an infiltrating murderous bandit into a police officer. She was momentarily unsure of what to do. Shio was also in a dilemma.
Usually, a bodyguard will only deal with illegal encroachers, but they have given a sufficiently sizable remuneration.
Fors was surprised and amused by the response as she asked,
If he really is imprisoned, are you thinking of breaking him out of jail? Let's put aside the problem of danger. That way, you two would be wanted, and you won't be able to be a bounty hunter again. When the time comes, do you plan on fleeing elsewhere with this gentleman?
As she spoke, Fors, who had already come up with a story, discovered that Duane Dantes had a response. This elegant gentleman with white sideburns turned to look at Walter and said with a calm and gentle voice,
2 matters. First, visit Baron Sindris and tell him that someone is trying to frame him.
Walter revealed a rare look of surprise and confusion, finding his employer's instructions incomprehensible. From his point of view, this matter was highly likely to be machinated by Baron Sindris. It was pointless visiting him, as it would only result in mockery. Klein smiled.
He was a guest recently, and he had threatened me for the shares. Following that, Mr. Quarren met with his demise. I find it hard to believe that he wouldn't be under suspicion. Therefore, I believe that it's necessary to warn him. This is what a gentleman should do.
The officers were slightly perturbed by what was said. They had the inexplicable feeling that the matter was more complicated than they had imagined. As for Walter, he was somewhat enlightened as he replied,
Yes, sir. I'll immediately visit Baron Sindris and inform your friends and his of this matter.
This way, if this wasn't done by Baron Sindris, all subsequent trouble would be dealt with by him. If he were the mastermind behind this, by involving him in the name of kindly warning him and spreading the news, it could create sufficient pressure from public opinion. It would make it easier for Member of Parliament Mocked and Company to rescue him.
Klein silently praised him.
Smart. A good butler really helps.
He continued,
Second, please call for my lawyer to handle this tiny inconvenience.
After instructing his butler and valet, Klein looked at the few officers in front of him.
All right, I'll follow you back to the station. I won't make things difficult for you. However, I wouldn't answer any of your questions before my lawyer arrives.
The leading officer heaved a sigh of relief as he said, with a nod,
Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Dantes.
At this moment, in the adjacent room, Fors hurriedly said,
Are we following?
Yes, I'll hide underneath the carriage now and follow it to the station. We can't be certain that those police officers are real ones.
Shio replied rather cautiously. She paused, seizing the moment to ask,
What else do you wish to say?
Fors thought for a moment and poignantly said,
Nobles and tycoons are truly terrifying.
Zio was taken aback. She didn't speak further as she walked to the window. Supporting herself with one hand, she nimbly jumped down, landing in the shadows of the building. A few minutes later, Klein and 2 officers boarded a carriage belonging to Duane Dantes. When he sat down, he looked at the thick carpet, his expression the same as before. At the police station, Klein was directly brought to an interrogation room. However, he didn't give a response, regardless of what the officer asked. Only when his lawyer arrived did he give an account. He said that he had only met Quaron once. He also mentioned that the negotiation of the share purchase was completely handled by a professional team, hence, he didn't personally involve himself in it. He repeated his statements, saying that he was unaware of anything else. This left the interrogator at a loss until he was called out of the room. After a while, the officer responsible for recording the statement walked in and said,
"All right, you may leave. A gentleman with an honorable status has vouched for you and paid for your bail."
Klein didn't immediately stand up as he continued sitting in the chair. He looked up and asked,
Who is it?
The officer said with a respectful tone.
Baron Sindris.
Klein immediately revealed a smile as he slowly got up. He left the interrogation room with his lawyer before meeting up with his butler and valet. At the entrance to the police station, he met Baron Sindris once again. This powerful banker's hair was still neatly combed back, with silver and black interweaving with each other. Beside him was a valet and his bearded bodyguard.
Thank you for your warning, Dantes. Few people would be so calm and sharp when they encounter such a sudden turn of events.
Sindris smiled as he took 2 steps forward, reached out his palm, and shook Klein's hand. Klein replied with a smile.
I was simply trusting your character.
Sindris obviously didn't believe such lip service. He found an excuse and, with his bodyguard, boarded Duane Dantes's carriage. As for his valet, he sent him off to his luxurious carriage to instruct the carriage driver to follow behind. As parasol trees flew past outside the carriage window, Sindris spoke first.
Dantes, how did you come to such a judgment?
Klein glanced at his butler and valet beside him and chuckled.
2 points. First, I believe that you will have a better solution. You wouldn't do something this violent.
Sindris drank a mouthful of white wine on the carriage as he chuckled.
Indeed.
The corners of Klein's mouth twitched as he said,
I'm very curious as to what kind of methods you would employ.
He had only asked in passing, without the extravagant hopes of obtaining an answer. However, Sindris chuckled and said,
With matters developing this far, it doesn't matter if I tell you. It's very simple. Isn't your goal to enter high society? I planned to hire women of different ages. They will accuse you, on different social occasions, that you toyed with their feelings and bodies, but you refuse to be responsible for your actions. If necessary, I'll find a few toddling children to clasp you around the legs, calling you PA. Perhaps I might get some civilians to accuse you of seducing their wives and destroying their marriage. This is Lowen, a rather conservative place. No one would wish to have such a person as a friend. Likewise, the Church of Evernight, who values marriage and family, will also distance itself from you. It will be difficult to clear the air on such matters. Yet, it wouldn't be a big deal. They wouldn't use their resources to help do an investigation for you. By the time you eventually find a loophole, your image would be hardened and known by all. How many people do you think will believe your explanations? You are just a newcomer and have yet to build a reputation. You aren't that trustworthy. Of course, if you were willing to accept my conditions, I'd stake my reputation for you. That will be the first step. Now, it wouldn't happen.
Klein was almost stunned by what he heard. He found himself too inexperienced compared to a seasoned banker who had established a commercial empire for himself. He replied with an unfazed smile.
I believe I should thank you. Second, if you really wanted the 3% shares, I wouldn't be your match when it comes to wealth. It would ultimately be better to force Mr. Quaron, rather than killing him after the sale is completed.
Sindris raised his right hand and pressed his fingers to the corner of his forehead as he chuckled.
No, you're mistaken. I was bent on obtaining the 3% share. However, you're right about one thing. I did prepare an irresistible offer for Quaron, but he suddenly made a decision and completed the deal with you at an extremely fast speed. It caught me by surprise.
Klein narrowed his eyes slightly as he suddenly fell silent. Returning to 160 Boakland Street, CO circled the area and entered the 3rd floor again, seeing 4s who had easily entered by using door opening. Fours, who had only followed from a distance away, asked curiously.
How is it? Nothing happened, right?
CO shook her head in a slightly wooden manner.
No.
She then revealed a poignant expression.
Nobles and tycoons are truly terrifying.
Chapter 858, Generous. On the tiny balcony of the master bedroom, Klein stood behind a railing in the form of Dwayne Dante's. He silently watched Baron Syndras's luxurious carriage depart. His mind was still resonating with the conversation he just had. He believed that there had been a secret plot behind the acquiring of the Coin Company's shares from the very beginning. According to Syndras, although the Coin Company has great potential and bright prospects, its current value is only limited to Backland. It's constrained by many conditions, making it not worthy for a powerful banker to place such great importance on it that he had to take on a stance of being hell-bent on acquiring it. After all, even if he didn't succeed, it would only be a difference in monetary profit. It wouldn't result in any losses. For the seller, Quaron, it's very normal to be under external stress to sell his shares for cash. It's also very normal for him to be unwilling to see Moneybags Baron Syndras from the Conservative Party. But herein lies the problem. As a businessman faced with a deal that isn't considered important, the political inclinations are something to be considered when prices are similar. There's no reason to reject the possibility of receiving an extremely high premium. Yet, he had deliberately rushed to close the deal with Dwayne Dantes before Syndras could make his final offer. It's as if he has a grudge with money or views the Conservative Party with extreme prejudice. And this doesn't match the current political climate. The Lowen Kingdom's internal politics hasn't reached such a splintered state. From the looks of it, someone is forcing Syndras to do this, and someone had designed a trap, using Quaron's 3% shares as the bait and himself as the cover to lure Syndras into the trap, wishing to achieve a certain goal. Klein looked at the street lamps under the night sky as he sighed poignantly.
Based on my assumption, if I hadn't discovered the problem tonight and hadn't sent someone to Syndras, the subsequent developments would definitely have me crushed by all kinds of seemingly incriminating evidence. And when the military or the Church of Evernight intervenes, there will undoubtedly be a twist in the evidence, incriminating Syndras. During this process, just a tiny misjudgment on Syndras's part will result in him treating Dwayne Dantes as an accomplice of the mastermind behind this ploy. He would use a rather intense method in response, hammering the final nail in my coffin.
As for who the mastermind was and their true goals, Klein had no idea. All he could do was confirm that Ma'am Mary likely wasn't aware of the truth. She was only used due to her anxiousness to preserve her control over the Coin Company. In short, she wasn't qualified to be deeply involved in the mastermind's ploy. Environment protection, new party, Conservative Party, bankers, acquisition, framing. One word after another surfaced in Klein's mind, seemingly allowing him to see through the present calm in Backland. He saw the dangerous stirrings that were hidden beneath the surface. They existed for a long time and hadn't been quelled because of the Great Smog. It was even possible that it was just an extension of the tragedy. When all of these meshed together, mixed with the tense international environment, Klein suddenly thought of a word: revolution. In that second, Klein seemed to catch a whiff of the impending storm.
Together with the prophecy of the apocalypse, I wonder how much chaos and madness are brewing in secret. Currently, my main goal is to start from the military and investigate the truth behind the Great Smog of Backland. If I were to get caught up in this maelstrom, there's a high chance I'll get involved in unnecessary trouble. Perhaps it might expose my sequence powers, preventing me from continuing my act as Dwayne Dantes.
Klein retracted his gaze, having made up his decision. It was to quickly extricate himself from the matter. As for Syndras's safety, he wasn't too worried. First, the former had the Conservative Party backing him, and he had his own faction. With him on alert, it would be difficult for him to suffer any further harm. Second, Klein didn't have any deep ties with him, thus providing a warning had already spoken volumes of his character. As for the truth behind Quaron's death, he had no right to carry out any investigations. All he could do was trust in the Nighthawks, rich experience, and the myriad of means to have a chance of finding the real clues.
How should I extricate myself? As long as the shares are with me, it implies that I'll ultimately remain center stage. Get Ma'am Mary to acquire it ahead of time? That will be very difficult. She likely doesn't have the funds. Sell it to Cindrus. That will be in violation of the contract.
Amidst Klein's flurry of thoughts, he gradually had an idea. His facial muscles twitched a little for some baffling reason before they relaxed. This was because what he wanted to do was something he had planned on doing but lacked the ability to do so. Furthermore, it would also benefit him by establishing an image, bettering his chances of entering high society. In the room adjacent to the balcony, Co and Fors were observing the streets and garden. One of them was looking at the crimson moon that was half hidden behind the thick clouds. There was a prolonged silence. Only when Dwayne Dantes's lights were extinguished did Fors turn to look at her friend. She said in excitement and clear poignancy,
Being a tycoon sure isn't easy. If you were him, you might have gone bankrupt in 3 days and be sent to jail.
Shio shot her a glance and said,
I can hire a powerful butler, a professional lawyer, and a capable business secretary to help me.
Fors didn't continue putting her down, as she said with a smile.
If I were you, I would change all of it to cash, bonds, and property. I'll use the annual income they bring about to maintain a decent life.
Just as she said that, she saw Shio frown slightly. She cast her gaze towards the first floor.
What happened?
Fors tensed up. Shio observed for a few seconds before saying,
My spiritual perception tells me that an item or matter related to black magic has appeared.
One of the biggest advantages of a sheriff was that when they were close enough, they could sense matters related to evil, chaos, and madness that weren't screened.
Black magic?
Fors was considered a senior beyonder, so she wasn't unfamiliar with that. Strictly speaking, anything that didn't pass through the 7 orthodox deities was considered as black magic. It included ritualistic magic that prayed to secret existences. In the typical sense, black magic referred to the use of flesh and blood, hair, and all kinds of strange items to cast strange spells. It partially involved evil gods, one's beyonder powers, the spirituality of the materials used, and the correct symbols and magic labels. Adi Shio nodded heavily and said,
Yes, it's on the first floor. I plan on taking a look. Stay here to protect Mr. Dantes.
Fors kept silent for 2 seconds and nodded without wasting any time.
Okay.
After Gio left the balcony's half-open room, Fors took out Leimano's travels from a hidden pouch, prepared to immediately take action if anything amiss happened. Elsewhere, Shio nimbly and briskly arrived at the first floor. Following her senses, she arrived outside a room. After confirming that the target was inside, Shio was surprised as her expression gradually darkened. If she didn't remember wrongly, this room likely belonged to Butler Walter, who had hired her. During her momentary daze, the black magic item or matter which triggered her spiritual perception vanished. Calm returned to the room as though nothing abnormal had happened. Zio hurriedly pressed her ear to the door and carefully listened, confirming that there was the breathing of a human inside. After waiting for a while and seeing that Walter wasn't doing anything else, she returned to the 3rd floor with a look of suspicion. She recounted her findings to her friend and finally said,
Do we feign ignorance, or think of a way to remind Mr. Dantes?
Fors thought and said,
Perhaps the butler doesn't have any ill intentions? Let's keep observing.
After deciding on their stance, she TSKED in wonder.
I have to say that Mr. Dwayne Dantes is a really pitiful person. Not only was he used by others to harm Baron Cindrus and get framed, nearly throwing him into jail and losing his reputation, but he also has a butler who researches black magic with an unknown motive. Sigh, I hope he doesn't lose his life because of that. On this front, he's only a helpless commoner.
Shio nodded in agreement.
If we're unable to determine the butler's intentions after 3 days are over, we can leave a slip for him to warn him.
The next morning, Klein glanced at Walter in a normal fashion after having breakfast before leaving home with Richardson. He rode a carriage to St. Samuel Cathedral. After the preaching and prayers, Klein didn't make any donations. Instead, he directly came to Bishop Electra.
Is there something?
Although this bishop was under immense stress due to the infiltration of Chanas Gate, he was still rather friendly when dealing with the faithful. Klein smiled and replied,
I've recently been involved in certain matters and have come to recognize my true self.
Without waiting for Electra to inquire, he continued,
I wish to establish a foundation that targets the poor. I hope that they can receive help from the church. I will place the coin company shares I have on hand into this foundation, so as to kickstart this initiative using all the funds obtainable from the contract.
Electra was nearly stupefied by what he heard, because it was definitely a sizable sum. Although it wasn't public knowledge how much Duane Dantes spent on acquiring the 3% shares, just from the relevant sources of information, it was estimated to be over £10,000. Furthermore, the future returns were nothing to scoff at. And back then, Ma'am Mary had been pursued by many men of status who had wealth in the range of tens of thousands of pounds. Therefore, for Duane Dantes to suddenly donate more than £10,000 was definitely considered a generous move. In the whole of the Church of Evernight, apart from donations from a deceased's will, there were only a handful of one-time donations that exceeded this amount.
This is an act that deserves all kinds of praise,
Electra said from the bottom of his heart.
However, I have the obligation to remind you that you shouldn't do something that exceeds your reach.
Klein smiled and replied,
This isn't a small sum for me as well, but it's still acceptable. It wouldn't affect my life and business.
Electra's smile gradually turned warm as he said with a nod,
The goddess will definitely watch you.
Upon hearing this blessing, Klein's expression nearly froze. Electra continued,
I will report the matter to His Grace and try to organize a charity party for this foundation. When the time comes, I'll invite the goddess's faithful from different domains. They will include powerful aristocrats and their families. Let's see if there are more people who are willing to participate.
He knew very well that Duane Dantes was attempting to enter high society. Therefore, he had deliberately made mention of powerful aristocrats. Chapter 859, New Mushrooms, in the bottom cabin of the future where it was pitch black. Frank Lee lit a candle which illuminated a table covered with flesh, mushrooms, wheat, and fish. He casually pushed the items away and cleared out a space that was just enough to accommodate a piece of paper. Right on the heels of that, he spread out a piece of paper, picked up a fountain pen, and wrote with an excited expression,
My dear friend, Gehrman Sparrow, I'm delighted to know that you found the dry mushrooms to be pretty good. Perhaps it's more useful than I imagined it to be. When I'm free, I'll take another look at them, as I've been fully focused in both body and mind. In the experiment you mentioned, I've already stopped all other creations. Most of the mushrooms have been burned away by Nina, leaving me with the last 3. I hope it will be of help to you. Placed together with them are my latest products. One of them is a type of mushroom that grows by feeding on flesh and blood. They have 3 breeds. The first is crossbred with wheat and can be ground into a mushroom powder that can be used to make bread. Another has the characteristic of being mixed with milk, allowing milk to be drawn from them. The last has been crossbred with fish. They come with a refreshing taste, and it has a thick, meaty texture. The things to take note is that they are absolutely not to be eaten raw. They need to be cooked in 90 degrees Celsius hot water for at least 5 minutes so as to kill any living characteristics. Otherwise, regardless of what it turns into, it will absorb the flesh and blood around it, including human organs. Another point. It's unable to distinguish between normal flesh and monster flesh, nor can they deal with the latter properly. They will accumulate with the corresponding toxicity and madness. I think they will experience different mutations because of the different types of monster flesh, producing different kinds of danger. However, I wasn't able to verify that, because I lack a sufficient number of monster corpses. If you were to obtain one while adventuring, please mail me one. I only need a tiny amount. As for any other problems that might exist, I'm not sure either. It's still a prototype, preventing further attempts and observation. I wish you all the best, and to have a bountiful time adventuring. Sincerely, your friend, Frank Lee.
After putting down the fountain pen, Frank read his reply in its entirety before folding in satisfaction. He found a gold coin and placed it over the letter. He quickly set up the messenger summoning ritual in preparation to chant the incantation. At this moment, he subconsciously surveyed his surroundings and was stunned. Then, Frank moved the nearby pile of soil out the door. In Empress Borough, the opulent villa of Earl Hall, Audrey was hiding in her room, observing the glass bottle in her hand. In the bottle was a translucent, colorless, sticky liquid. It was like a mirror when still, completely reflecting everything within its vicinity. When undulations happened, a very tiny whirlpool would silently spin beneath the surface. This was none other than the hypnotist potion which she had just successfully concocted. Audrey had already digested her psychiatrist potion and planned on advancing to Sequence 6 before Backlund's psychology alchemists contacted her. After using Placate to quell her mental state, Audrey gently bit down on her lip, raised the glass bottle, and downed the potion. After a brief chill, she suddenly felt her mind seem to explode. Her body also seemed to be contaminated as it turned somewhat incorporeal. At that moment, her soul body, astral projection, and ether body were being absorbed and assimilated by her body of heart and mind. Her entire person was like an amalgamation of pure thoughts that began churning. She felt the boundless sea of collective subconscious which connected all living creatures, and she sensed the spirituality sky that stood in contrast. Having experienced the sense of alarm she received during her psychiatrist advancement, Audrey didn't panic. She ultimately maintained a sliver of lucidity and curbed her instinctive urge to fuse into the sea. She allowed her consciousness to spread out in all directions before contracting like a rubber band. After an unknown period of time, she finally found her inner self. She saw the back of her hand covered in dense, firm golden scales, and saw that the hair on her shoulders turned luxuriant and heavy, as though they were really made of gold. After these anomalies receded, Audrey quickly recovered. However, when she looked into the mirror, she found her green eyes appear clear, but deep down was a strange, bottomless whirlpool. It made it difficult for others to shift their gaze away from them, easily drowning within them. This is a sign of the dispersing spirituality that has yet to have been fully converged. Audrey slowly eased her brows as her smile turned bright. She looked at herself in the mirror and nodded gently, finding it hard to hide her smile.
Audrey, you are already a Sequence 6.
After she calmed her emotions, she seriously introspected herself to determine her new Beyonder powers and the qualitative changes. After some work, Audrey came to a rough understanding of the situation. First, her constitution had received a significant enhancement. Be it her strength or agility, it had exceeded an ordinary person's. She could also form a layer of scales over her skin, largely resisting and reducing any damage. Second was a qualitative change in psychological cue. It became a form of hypnosis within the non-combat domain. As long as she made the target focus on something, Audrey could open the door to their body of heart and mind and directly alter their conscious and affect their subconscious. This way, the target wouldn't notice that they were abiding by her arrangements, taking actions that didn't match their true intentions. Of course, if Audrey's arrangement directly harmed the target's life or something he subconsciously placed great importance to, then the target would produce an intense resistance, causing the hypnosis to fail. In addition, if the target had a strong soul and firm body and mind, they would be able to resist the hypnosis to a certain extent. Third, battle hypnotism. Audrey could forcefully hypnotize an enemy, making them do something abnormal, such as attacking their companions or avoid her, the hypnotist. However, such hypnosis only lasted for short periods of time. The target would quickly snap awake and sense the problem. Similarly, it was unable to harm the target's life and make the enemy commit suicide. Fourth was psychological invisibility. With one's control of the target's body of heart and mind, allowing oneself to remain in the blind spot of one's consciousness, she could achieve the effect of invisibility, despite someone standing in front of her without being able to sense her.
Very impressive. My only regret is that I still lack beyonder powers that can launch direct attacks.
Audrey puffed her cheeks in an indiscernible manner as she tried hard to converge her spirituality and make her eyes less intoxicating. After mostly eliminating her abnormalities, she opened the door and let Susie in. With the help of her golden retriever, she began familiarizing herself with her new beyonder powers. Before long, her lady's maid, Annie, knocked on the door and entered with an invitation letter in hand.
My lady, the church will be organizing a charity party on Saturday night for a newly established bursary foundation that's targeted at the poor. They have invited you.
Audrey didn't directly agree, as she asked,
Did they invite my parents?
Yes, they were also invited, as well as Lord Hibbert.
Annie replied honestly. Audrey nodded and said with a smile,
Tell the church that I'll be participating. Also, figure out the exact situation with the charity foundation so that I can better decide on the amount to donate.
In the evening at the Intis Renzo restaurant.
This place is truly dazzling. It's much prettier than the living rooms and activity rooms of many nobles.
Force looked around as though she was here to gather material. Although she had participated in many noble organized literature saloons, she had always visited them at their residences and not at such top-end restaurants. Shio grabbed at her coarse blonde hair.
This is the style of Intis. It's different from us. It might look pretty, but it lacks substance.
How does it lack substance? Look, those are all famous oil paintings and sculptures.
Force deliberately retorted. During this process, she suppressed her voice, as they hadn't entered by the main door. As she spoke, she found the private room mentioned by Walter. Force directly used door opening and pulled Gio in. They hid inside a pantry cupboard and waited for their target of protection, Duane Dantes, and his guests to arrive.
How much do you think the 3% shares of Coin Company is worth?
Bored, Force casually asked. In the morning, she had entered St. Samuel Cathedral with Shio to provide protection while feigning prayer. Shio hesitated and said,
At least several £1,000s. The bishop seemed to place a great deal of importance on the matter.
How rich. Donating thousands of pounds just like that. Why doesn't he save poor people like us?
Force said poignantly in a joking manner. At this moment, the door to the room opened. Duane Dantes and Mock's family walked in and took their seats. The waiters also started rushing around. Shio and Force didn't speak further as they eavesdropped on the chit-chat outside as they observed the surrounding situation. From time to time, their noses would twitch because of the food's fragrance. Suddenly, Gio frowned as though she had sensed something before quickly easing her brows as though nothing had happened.
What's wrong?
Force leaned in towards her friend's ear and whispered. Shio shook her head.
Nothing. I was uptight, causing me to overreact.
At that moment, Klein put down his fork and knife, glancing to the side with a normal expression. In his eyes, which had his spirit vision activated, a blonde, red-eyed head had appeared out of the void. In its mouth was a thick letter. Klein faintly caught the scent of milk, wheat, and fish. The corners of his mouth twitched as he secretly reached out his left hand to grab the letter. And sitting in the other 3 seats, Mocked, Rihanna, and Hazel didn't notice anything. Klein stuffed the letter into his pocket without anyone noticing as a waiter walked out of the pantry, serving a new dish to the 4 customers. Among the dishes, 2 of them were butter-fried mushrooms. Upon seeing this scene, Klein suddenly felt disgusted. His expression turned odd as his left palm that remained in his pocket trembled. Chapter 860, Runaway Horse.
Thankfully, it's not a mushroom dish I ordered, or else it would have been a waste of a dish.
Despite believing that he no longer affected by the trauma inflicted upon him by mushrooms, the smell that came with the letter successfully made him suffer a relapse. Klein's expression rapidly restored itself as he retracted his left hand and placed it on the cup to his side, drinking the ice water inside.
Please give me another cup.
As though nothing had happened, he turned his head and instructed the waiter who was at the door. At the same time, he pressed down his clothes and slowly got up while expressing his apologies before heading for a bathroom attached to the private room. It was opposite the pantry placed on either side of the main door. Hiding in a cupboard, Forrest heard footsteps approach as the bathroom's door opened and closed. She couldn't help but lean into Shio's ear and whisper in amusement.
It's the second time. They've been here for slightly more than 30 minutes, and Dwayne Dantes has already gone to the washroom twice. The first time was clearly to pee. If it's for the same reason, it means that this gentleman's kidneys, bladder, or prostate is problematic. He's coming out, he's really only peeing. Tiski seems to drink plenty of water usually, and often heads to the bathroom. Sigh. It's difficult being a tycoon, but it's even more difficult being a good-looking tycoon in particular.
Shio rolled her eyes.
What has that got to do with you? Focus and be serious. We're on a mission. Also, that bodyguard of the member of parliament named Mocked seemed pretty strong. He's probably a beyonder. We need to be careful.
Forrest had no choice but to suppress her desire to chat as she shrank back.
They're guarding the area outside without being wary of others passing through the walls. How unprofessional. All right, we'll chat when we're back.
At that moment, Klein had returned to the table and sat back in his seat. He drank a mouthful of ice water, sipped on some white wine, and said to Mocked with a smile,
Having been here in Backlund for nearly 2 months, I've been busy getting used to the environment and hadn't found the time to start a new business. Every day I wake up seeing money flowing out without any coming in. Heh, it's about time I do something.
He indicated his willingness to participate in the arms dealing by cracking a joke. Mocked stroked his cup and said with a warm smile,
I can empathize with that. In the beginning, I was in such a stage as well. How much money do you have to spare? I can introduce you to some friends for a partnership.
Klein replied in a calm tone.
I'll be able to spare a maximum of 20,000 pounds at present.
You're richer than I imagined.
Mocked said with a heartfelt sigh. Under normal circumstances, a tycoon who had a liquidity of 20,000 pounds was definitely someone whose overall wealth was on the order of 100,000 pounds. Not giving Dwayne Dantes a chance to be humble, he casually said,
Didn't you buy 3% of the coin company's shares before? You can pledge it for at least 10,000 pounds. That will give you some liquidity.
Klein immediately smiled and sighed.
I have already donated those shares to the church. I plan to establish a bursary foundation that's targeted at the poor.
You donated it to the church?
Mocked had yet to meet the priests or bishops of St. Samuel Cathedral today. Furthermore, he had been out and had yet to receive the invitation. Therefore, he wasn't aware of the new development. Ma'am, Rihanna, and Hazel, who were enjoying the delicious food, looked up as well, subconsciously casting their gazes at Dwayne Dantes. At their level, it wasn't uncommon to have friends they knew that could donate 10,000 pounds, but very few could donate that much in one go. And among these few people, there might not even be one who was willing to donate such amounts. No, there was one now, Dwayne Dantes.
Yes.
Klein nodded with his usual expression.
If not for the goddess's blessings, I would have long died in the chaotic southern continent. And when I was young, if I had the chance to attend school and study, perhaps my life would have been completely different. Thus, I wish to give those children who desire to change their fates some hope.
Your character is as amazing as your generosity. Rihanna lowered her cutlery and praised sincerely. Hazel also nodded indiscernibly. The way she looked at Dwayne Dantes turned significantly gentler. Seeing her parents begin an idle conversation over the charity, she excused herself and walked to the bathroom, seemingly pressing her right hand onto her abdomen. When she arrived at the door, she was just about to turn right when she suddenly turned her head and looked at the cupboard beside the pantry. She frowned slightly and revealed a look of confusion before retracting her gaze and opening the washroom's wooden door. When Hazel came out after washing her hands, she had apparently forgotten the abnormality that had happened. She touched the necklace at her chest and returned to the dining table. Dinner came to an end after the dishes and dessert were served. The four left the private room and met the two bodyguards outside with their servants. They were preparing to return home. At this moment, Hazel suddenly paused and said,
I think I dropped my ear studs inside. Sorry about that. Please wait a moment.
Without waiting for Mamriana to instruct a waitress to do the search, Hazel turned around and circled around the bend, returning to the room she had been in. Hazel lowered her hand that held her left ear and directly entered the connected pantry until she was in front of the cupboard. She then placed her hand on it. She had planned on opening the door to the cupboard at an extremely fast speed, but after some thought, she decided to be cautious by holding onto her necklace with one hand and turning her body sidewards to prevent any sudden attacks from whatever was inside. As she held her breath, Hazel took the chance when the waiter was clearing the table inside to suddenly pull the door open, exposing whatever was inside. However, apart from some spare cutlery and tablecloth, there was nothing. Hazel once again wore a look of puzzlement, as though she couldn't believe the scene before her eyes.
I clearly sensed something very valuable inside.
She muttered under her breath and quickly closed the door before her maidservant chased up to her and walked out of the pantry. Outside the Intis Sorenzo restaurant, Forrest and Sio turned their heads simultaneously and looked inside.
That girl actually noticed us?
Forrest whispered in disbelief and amazement. If she hadn't used door opening and sneaked out from the back of the cupboard, she and Zio would have been discovered, having no choice but to admit that they were secretly protecting Dwayne Dantes. She wore a confounded look as well.
I remember that you didn't speak or move about when she was heading to the washroom.
Perhaps. She's a beyonder as well, and has a certain type of spiritual intuition.
Forrest made an uncertain guess.
Mr. Dwayne Dantes sure leads a difficult life. He often encounters the power struggles between tycoons and nobles while having a butler that secretly studies black magic at home. Furthermore, there are beyonders with mysterious powers living nearby. By the way, what's her name?
Hazel.
Shio was looking for Dwayne Dantes' carriage, preparing to hide underneath when her gaze suddenly froze.
Forrest, look, that person is acting oddly.
Forrest traced her gaze and saw a middle-aged man in a black formal suit. He was pacing along the sides of the street, looking very anxious and frustrated.
How is he acting oddly?
Forrest didn't have the time to observe him carefully, as she directly asked. Kamzosio answered simply.
He's dressed as a decent gentleman, but his shoes are very dirty. It's as though he hasn't shined them in a while. As you know, Backlund is covered in dust. Also, he would touch the area underneath his armpit. I dare bet that there's an underarm holster hidden there. Apart from that, his expression and attitude imply that he isn't normal. They're coming out soon. I'll head to the carriage first. Watch that person, and ensure that Mr. Dantes is protected.
All right.
As Forrest found it troublesome, she also found it rather interesting. Hence, she retreated to an area that concealed her as she observed the entrance of the Intis Sorenzo restaurant. Nearly 30 seconds later, Dwayne Dantes and the Mocked family walked out. After bidding each other farewell, they headed for their respective carriages. At this moment, a two-wheeled carriage charged out from the end of the street at an extremely fast speed, as though it would topple at any moment. The horse that pulled the carriage wore a rabid look in its eyes, as though it had been alarmed. It charged for the Intis Sorenzo restaurant's entrance in its panic. Of Mock's two bodyguards, one went forward in a bid to subdue the runaway horse, while the other protected the Member of Parliament and family. At this moment, the middle-aged man who had been loitering around had approached from the back and drew a revolver. With a warped expression, he aimed at Mock's head. Klein's right hand was raised indiscernibly before he retracted it without doing anything. He nimbly performed a jump, dodging the runaway horse. At the same time, Forrest, who was hiding elsewhere, clenched her palm gently and pulled to the side. The assailant's leg suddenly went limp, as though he had stumbled over something as he fell to the ground, failing to pull the trigger. In his haste, he pressed down with one hand and immediately leaped up, planning to shoot wildly without aiming. However, when he squeezed his finger, he didn't feel any tactile feedback. The revolver had already dropped by Hazel's feet. Following that, he and the runaway horse was subdued by the bodyguards.
Why did you attempt to assault me?
Mocked held back his churning emotions as he took a step forward and asked with a deep voice. The middle-aged man immediately laughed as he shouted with a hysterical expression.
It's you. It's all because of you and the others. You talk about atmospheric pollution, wanting things like anthracite. My factory is going bankrupt. My child is dying from an illness, and my wife has committed suicide.